Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to go briefly through what our agenda is going to be tonight. We're going to talk a little bit about kind of lift the veil a little bit. Where do your recyclables go? There's a lot of misconceptions about, are things really recycled? Does recycling really happen? So we're going to talk about that. I know people see news stories and hear other things in terms of whether or not recycling actually happens. I have a really neat video that I hope we're going to be able to show tonight. Great. That actually shows the sorting process so you can see what that looks like. Talk a little bit about WM and some of our investments in recycling and why it's something we're really passionate about and why we see it as the future of the solid waste industry. We're going to talk a little bit about what makes something recyclable, what makes a curbside recycling program successful. A lot of times I get asked, this chair is made of recyclable material. Why can't I throw it in my bin? Or why can't your truck take it? So we're going to talk a little bit about what that process looks like. And then lastly, we'll talk a little bit about Evans, your participation, some of your savings in greenhouse gas emissions, and some other things from your program last year and ways that we can increase that in the future. So we've heard it all. Recycling is not real. Recycling really goes to the landfill, that it's made up by companies like WM, that it all ends up in the ocean. Kind of all the excuses or all the things that you hear out there, we have heard all of those as well. But I'm here to tell you that recycling is real. Recycling really happens. In 2023, so we don't have our final 2024 numbers yet, but in 2023, WM recovered over 15 million tons of recyclable material. We have over 100 recycling facilities across the United States. And between 2022 to 2026, we're going to invest over $1 billion in new recycling technology, new recycling facilities. And, we wouldn't make that investment if recycling wasn't really happening right. So a little bit about where recyclables go. So this is just a quick flow chart of what the process looks like. So starting on the far left, you have your collection. That's residents put something in their recycle bin, put it out on their curb. From there, it typically goes to a transfer station. A transfer station is where trucks don't drive all the way to the landfill typically. They don't drive all the way to a materials recovery facility. So the trucks will go to a centralized location, put all their recyclable materials into a big 18-wheeler, and then that 18-wheeler drives out to the MRF for the material recovery facility. There at the material recovery facility is where materials are sorted. So you'll see some pictures later in this presentation of big bales of aluminum cans and plastic and things like that. And that's kind of what the end product looks like. It gets shipped off to the market. A really neat thing about aluminum is, because I just mentioned it, aluminum can that's put in your recycle bin within as short as 60 days is back on the shelf as a new can. But what makes aluminum so great for recycling is it doesn't break down. Plastic and a lot of other products break down over time. Aluminum does not, and so it's infinitely recyclable. So in as short as 60 days, that'll be back on the shelf. Lastly, end markets. So those recyclables are sent to end markets all across the United States primarily. Most of our domestic end markets are here. A lot of the paper mills, for example, are in the Pacific Northwest. It just kind of depends what the product is. Different areas of the country have kind of different specialties, but those end markets take that recyclable material and turn them into new products. And that's really the final step in the process. The term is PCR, or post-consumer recyclables. So that's a product that is made from recyclable material. You see it a lot on your Amazon box. This cardboard was made from recyclable material, and that's post-consumer recyclable. So next up, here's a really brief video that I hope works. This kind of shows a lot of the Willy Wonka machines and things that we use for sorting.
We all know it's a good idea to recycle. But what happens to that aluminum can or all that paper after you put it in the recycling bin? Where does it go? What does it become in its second life? How does this water bottle become a backpack, jeans, or shoes, or even a WM shirt? Let's find out. This is a material recovery facility, or a MRF, and this is where the real work of recycling begins. Here at the MRF, the WM trucks unload all their material onto what we call the tip floor. Next up, a trip to a massive conveyor belt that takes all this material to a pre-sort room. Here's where sorters work by hand to remove stuff that should not go into your curbside recycling bin. Stuff like batteries, plastic bags, Christmas lights, clothes, pretty much anything that can clog or break the MRF's equipment, or worse, hurt one of the employees. Now that we've minimized contaminants, the real sorting can begin. Cups, cans, containers, and bottles are separated from newspaper and other paper material. Then comes the eddy current. This part is pretty cool. An electric current backs the aluminum off the conveyor belt and into a metal-only stream. All these materials are separated and compacted into bales, like hay bales. Forklifts move the bales into a finished product area where they're inspected for quality. Once they get the thumbs up, these bales of metal, plastic, and paper are shipped around the country to different companies that'll give them a second life or turning them into new stuff. This process is all about creating this circular economy where everything is being reused and recycled so that less stuff ends up in a landfill. Last year, WM recycled 10 million tons of material across 103 facilities like this one across the country. That's amazing, but we can do even more, and you can help by recycling right.
The eddy current is pretty cool. So aluminum is not. There's another one.
Started again, sorry.
Aluminum is not magnetic, and so that eddy current is basically a reverse magnet that shoots the aluminum and that's separated. So it's pretty neat to see in person. So I mentioned before, most of our end markets are here domestically. Over 80% of our material goes to markets here in the United States. After that, Southeast Asia is where some of those mills are located. And based upon the recyclable material that we export, we're the 11th largest exporter in the United States. But like I said, most of that is here domestically. Over 80% is here within the United States. I have a couple of examples of some partnerships and some products that we're doing. So in the video, he mentioned turning plastic bottles into WM shirts. A small way that we contribute to the circular economy, all of our drivers, all of our frontline employees all wear shirts made of recyclable material. So the uniforms that they're given are all made from plastic bottles. This partnership with Reprieve, we take plastic bottles, send them to Reprieve. Reprieve turns those into fabric, and then that fabric goes into shirts and carpet tiles and jeans and a variety of other products where that can be reused. Additionally, at the WM Phoenix Open, it's the largest zero waste event, sporting event in the United States. All of the Peter Millar apparel that's sold at that golf tournament logo wear is also made of recyclable material. This is an exciting new partnership. A question I get asked a lot is about plastic bags. Why are plastic bags not recyclable? That goes back to my comment at the beginning about material breaking down. And while aluminum does not break down, plastic breaks down a lot. And so those plastic bags, that thin paper film, it really, in the past, there wasn't the technology to sort it out or to use it. So we've partnered with HEB to start recycling that plastic film. And so within the near future, those very thin plastic bags, maybe not as much of a big deal here in Colorado, I guess, but it's still a really exciting advancement in kind of the recyclable world and creating a better circular economy. So I want to talk a little bit next about some investments that we're making. Up on the screen, you'll see these are kind of our three core tenets of our Chief Sustainability Officer. So WM 4 years ago hired a Chief Sustainability Officer. It was the first time in our company's history we had a chief level employee whose entire job was around sustainability. Even our name change reflects that shift. So we are no longer waste management. We are now WM, shifting away from just managing waste, but to really investing in sustainability. And so our three main goals under sustainability are making sure material is repurposed. That really goes back to kind of that process I was talking about. Energy is renewable and that communities are thriving. So we're the largest recycler in North America. I mentioned at the beginning, in 2023, we recovered 15.2 million tons. There's a map up there. You'll see several facilities here in Colorado. So for Evans, your material goes to our Franklin Street MRF, which is on the north side of Denver, about 45 minutes south of here. The video you saw was of our Salt Lake City MRF. But the sorting equipment is the same that we use at Franklin Street. Franklin Street has all the robotics and sorting arms and all the other things that you saw in that video. Right here is just some pictures of some of our equipment, as well as some finished bales and what those look like. 3 areas where we're really trying to focus because there's a lot of opportunity to increase recycling. One is fiber, and that really goes back to cardboard boxes or using paper into napkins. There's a lot of opportunity there. Next is in plastic. Plastic is recyclable, and there's a lot of different things that plastic can be turned into. And so we're really focused on that. And then lastly is glass. Glass has always been a challenging thing in the recycling industry because it's heavy. And at the end of the day, we're a transportation company. So you take something heavy, if you have to ship it long distances, it can get expensive. And so we're investing in more local uses. So for example, Rocky Mountain Bottling for Budweiser, a lot of our glass collected on the Front Range goes there when possible to turn into new glass bottles. Glass that is broken, and I mean literally broken into such little pieces that it can't be turned into a new glass bottle, a lot of times is used for things like landfill cover. As the landfill is filled in, glass layer will be put over it so the wind doesn't blow away the trash. Here's a map of some of our upcoming expansions. You'll notice one right around here, about 45 minutes south of here. We're building a new MRF, and it's going to be called Denver East, on the east side of Denver, kind of in Aurora. And that's a $115 million investment facility in recycling. It's going to have all the latest and greatest tools and robots and all the things you saw in the video, but even better. And it comes at the perfect time. Next year is going to be the effective date of the state producer responsibility law. I want to talk a little bit about that without kind of getting off track. But in 2022, the state legislature passed a law that shifts the cost of recycling from consumers or towns or cities to producers of packaging, right? So think Tide, that makes Tide bottles, and Procter & Gamble and Coca-Cola. The cost of recycling is going to be shifted to the producers, they're called. The new plan actually was just released within the last couple of weeks, but starting in 2026, we don't quite know the effective date yet, but there will no longer be a cost to your residents to participate in recycling. That cost will go to the producers, which I'm sure it'll get passed along back to consumers in some way, but at least in their trash bill, they'll no longer receive a recycling portion for their trash bill. That's really exciting, and that's part of our development of a new MRF here along the Front Range is because of that state EPR law. We expect a significant increase in recyclable material. One of the things we hear most often is cost is a reason why some people don't participate. And so by eliminating that cost, or at least shifting that cost onto producers, the hope is that there will be more participation, which is more increased diversion. I want to go through a little bit about what makes something recyclable in a curbside program. I mentioned at the beginning, I get asked a lot, well, this is made of X material that is recyclable. Why can't I throw it in my bin? So there's really 3 main components of what makes a recycling program successful. 1, we have to be able to safely collect it. 2, we have to be able to safely process it. And 3, we have to be able to sell it somewhere. It doesn't do any good to collect these materials and sort them and then leave them sitting in a warehouse somewhere. They need to be turned into new products. So this is our generally accepted recycling program. At the end of that video, you'll see here he mentioned Recycle Right. Recycle Right is our trademarked kind of recycling program. We really try to encourage cities and towns and others to keep it simple when it comes to recycling. Stick to these main categories. If it's not one of those pictures, it's probably not recyclable, because cost is one objection we hear, but the other objection we hear is that it's complicated. People don't want to put the thought into what goes into what bin. And so, we really encourage people to recycle right by keeping it easy and sticking to these kind of main categories. I want to talk a little bit about contamination. Contamination is also it's kind of one of the big roadblocks in the way of successful recycling program. So contamination is really anything that's not recyclable that ends up in a recycling bin. Through our sorting process, we can typically sort out about 20% or less contamination. So for example, we use a robot that as it's going down the line, it'll take a picture, sends a message to the robot arm, and it can tell the difference between a Coke bottle and a Pepsi bottle. Like, it is that smart, which is why we can sort out about 20% contamination. Once you start getting above that, though, that's where a lot more of those contaminants get through. And why that's important is because when you see those bales at the end, when we send those to the end markets, they don't want to get a bale of plastic that has a bunch of cardboard in the middle of it, because then they can't do their process right. And so it's really important, A, to stick to the recycle right, and then B, we utilize a technology called Smart Truck that really is intended to identify contamination in the recycle bin, inform the resident, and hopefully the hope is that it will change behavior, right? And so essentially what happens is the truck will pull up to the house, takes a picture of the container, takes a video of the container being dumped into the hopper of the truck. AI is used to analyze that video of the material coming into the truck, and it'll point out contamination. If it thinks there's contamination or there's suspect, it'll send it to a human. A human reviews that and it'll say, no, that's not, or yes, that is. The number one source of contamination in recyclable material is not actually something that's not recyclable. It's actually bagged recyclables. So it's really important to not bag your recyclables. The videos that I showed and some of these pictures you can see, there are some humans on there, but the process is very fast, and there's not time for a human to open the bag and dump all the mixed recyclables out onto the sort line. And so if recyclables are bagged, it ends up taking a really expensive trip to the landfill. And so that's something we always try to stress to people, is just put your loose recyclables in your bin. Don't bag them up. You can go to Amazon and you can buy bags that say they're recyclable bags. And while the bag might technically be made of recyclable material or be able to be recycled, you should not put your recyclables in there. And that's our number one source of contamination. If you're ever at the MRF, I'm happy to take anyone on a tour, and I know some of your staff has done that. But there's a pile where you'll see the contamination. A lot of it is bagged recyclables. And like I said, unfortunately, it's taken an expensive trip to the landfill. Here's a picture of a sort line where you can see the workers are trying to hand pull plastic bags and other contaminated material out of the sorting line. So that will shut down the plant. And as you can see in the picture there, they're trying to pull bags, Christmas lights, all those kinds of things that don't belong in recyclable material will cause the equipment to malfunction. So I want to talk a little bit about Evans and kind of what your impact is. So right now you have about 5,500 trash customers, and about 1,080 of those trash customers also participate in recycling. So that's a participation rate just short of 20%. A little bit about kind of your numbers, what this all means, right? So in 2024, we collected 250 tons of recyclable material from your community. That's about 544 metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions, equivalent to 117 vehicles, or 3,000 mature trees, which is equivalent to 52 million sheets of paper. So that's just here in Evans. So that's it's really great. But like I said on the previous slide for the participation rate, there is some opportunity to increase participation. I talked a little bit about the state EPR law. I do think that is going to be really important in increasing that participation, because it removes that cost barrier that some folks might have. So I think that's going to be really important. Also, we've discussed with your staff working on some ways that we can communicate recycling and the benefits and kind of what that looks like to your residents. And so I think there's really some opportunity to make a big impact here. So that's all I had, but I wanted to leave time for questions, so I will stop there because I'm sure there's going to be questions.
Great, thank you so much. Appreciate the presentation. Actually, I think a couple of us on council had the opportunity to go down to Denver and check out the facility a few years ago, right? And I thought it was pretty great tour.
I can tell you I shred things now because I shred things now because of that, because we were on top of where the conveyor belt was. I can see full-on addresses, and I was like, ooh, that shouldn't be there.
And I always tease people, if your teenagers act up, we can put them on the sort line, because that is not a fun job to do.
Exactly.
I do have I actually was looking at your listing of what was recyclable, and one of the things on there I saw were pizza boxes. I always was under the impression that they were not, because of the
They're
grease and
soiled,
everything that it gets contaminated, so therefore you could not recycle it.
Yeah, so some of that is due to advancements in sorting technology and ways that it can be reused by the end markets. Now, certainly, you shouldn't leave whole pieces of pizza in there.
Obviously,
But
right?
unless the pizza box is completely looks like it was soaked in water and flimsy, it can be reused. And that's, what we're hearing from our mills is that cardboard, even with some of that grease on there, they can turn into other products. So that was true in the past, but not as much anymore.
Okay, so my question for you is this: those that don't recycle and take advantage of this opportunity, they just throw it in the regular trash. That still doesn't get sorted. That goes straight to the landfill, then, or is there still? Okay,
Anything in your trash does not get sorted.
okay, got it. I think a lot of it's the education piece on this, because I believe a lot of people, including myself, think it's sometimes pain to recycle, sort this, sort that, throw it here. Can this go in there? Can it not go in there? And, once you sit there and have to sort through everything, well, can it or can it not? It's just sometimes easier just to throw it in the normal, in the trash. And again, about the pizza boxes.
Yeah.
Fortunately,
it's come a long way from the days when there were 4 or 5 recycling bins
Right.
and you had to sort that complicated. But, and that's why, like I said, we really try to stick to this and keep it simple.
Right. Yeah, because I know my parents in California have like 3 of them. Wait, food, something. It's like, so. No, it's a great presentation. It's good to know. And I think some of it is the cost. I know there is some cost savings here in Evans if you do use the recycling bins and all that, but I think still for a lot of people it is kind of cost prohibitive and they don't take advantage of that. So.
Yeah, and I mentioned that state EPR bill. It's not finalized what that reimbursement's exactly going to look like, but hopefully that removes a lot of that cost barrier for folks to participate.
Any other questions, comments?
I think the pizza box thing came about when China refused to take cardboard because of contamination, because the United States was complaining about contaminated stuff that they were sending back in toys and whatever. And I get that. I ripped mine in half and put the cover that has the name of the pizza place in the recycle bin and throw the other half in the trash. And Waste Management may want to talk to upper level Domino's, because they squirt oil on the bottom of their pizza boxes all the time. I'm not quite sure what that is. Maybe to make it not stick or what. I don't know.
Yeah, typically as long as the cardboard still has structural integrity, even if it has grease or oil, it's still okay. But yeah. And even, kind of along those lines, peanut butter jars and things like those don't need to be completely spotless either. Again, sorting and cleaning technology has gotten a lot better.
Yeah, I think that was one of my questions, because I know before in the past when we went to the facility and had a presentation, it was like the purity was one of the things about, especially with plastic bottles, don't have if you can tear out the name and if it had a plastic around it and stuff like that. But it's good to know that has shifted, which is fantastic because it makes it easier, especially when it comes to the sorting component. Also, if all goes well with that new legislation, I think it would be fantastic to see more participation, especially since, how many metric tons, you were able to, that might triple, who knows? That'd be fantastic, and it would help. One of the things I was going to also mention, because I know in the past, one of the things that was brought up was when people shred, that was also considered a contaminant. So how is that looked at now?
So that's a good question. And it really goes back to the sorting process. Shredded paper typically will fall right through. So it's better to leave your paper intact.
intact.
There are other ways. Oh, I'm sorry. There are other ways to. So we work with some of the larger paper shredding companies, Iron Mountain, and some of those to recycle that paper. But in a curbside program where it's going through that automated sorting equipment, shredded paper will fall through the process.
Yeah, because it's one of the things that you would see bagged, and they probably put it on top of like their recyclables. But it's good to know. That's all I have. And also, I wanted to say, yeah, the name change, because I sit on the board with Jason Chan,
Oh yeah.
with the Regional Air Quality Council, and he's like, yeah, we're WM now. I was like,
It's
oh,
still
good
hard
to
for
know.
me to remember sometimes.
No, definitely. Well, fantastic. Thank you for your presentation.
I know you said it's the state law is not finalized on what that'll look like yet, but do you have any general idea of like what implementation would look like? Would that mean that we could roll out 4,000 more recycling bins in Evans? And
Yeah. So one of the things that's still to be determined is what the reimbursement structure is going to look like. So will the producers send money directly to us and we won't bill the city of Evans? Will they send it to the city of Evans and we'll continue to bill, and then that'll just reimburse that portion of it? So that's one thing to be decided. The other piece, along with this, there's going to be a lot of money coming up, grant money available to do things like purchase recycling carts, to do large-scale rollouts and things like that. The focus of the EPR plan for at least the first 3 years is going to be on the Front Range. That's where the population center is for the most part in Colorado, right? And so a lot of those resources and dollars and programs are going to happen, along from basically Fort Collins to Pueblo is where a lot of those programs are going to happen. And so there will be grant programs available to do like what you're talking about with rollouts of recycling programs on a larger scale.
yeah, just thinking logistically, I mean, just in Evans, that would be like 4,000.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's huge, huge. Okay.
Just one last thing. Councilmember Neal mentioned the whole China thing. I know in the past, because China was one of the biggest buyers of recyclables from the U.S., and it looks like now, like you've diversified ever since then. So it's great to see that has changed.
Yeah, so that it's referred to as China Sword. Waste haulers were shipping their recyclable material to China. That ended in about 2017, and that's part of where the misconception came from in the U.S. from consumers that recycling should be free, because back then when that material was going to China, it was free. They were using it as part of their manufacturing to turn it into new products. When that material started staying domestically, those mills have higher wages and things like that, which is a good thing, but that also increased the cost of that recycling, the finances of it. So that hasn't happened in quite a long time, but that used to be the case for sure.
I have a question for you. Commercial is a little different for residential. So we've looked at it before for my apartment complex, but it was determined to be a little too much for what they wanted to pay. But also, I've noticed at our other properties, people don't care. It's recycling. They just throw anything in. Are there penalties for that when that happens?
Yeah, so I talked about our contamination fees on the residential side. We have the same thing on commercial side. But as you observed, it is a lot more challenging in a commercial environment or a multifamily environment because of the issue of illegal dumping, essentially.
Oh, yeah, all the time.
There are some things that you can do to address that, or at least capture only specific types of products. So, for example, we make custom lids that only have small slits to slide cardboard in, so you can capture cardboard, or lids that have holes big enough to put aluminum cans and glass bottles. So there are ways around that to where you can still capture some recyclable material. The other thing that can be done in some cases, though it can be a lot more challenging in a multifamily environment, it's better for a commercial environment, is you can do locked containers. So we have, we service whole city commercial accounts, for example, and we'll put locks on their containers to address the issue of illegal dumping. That's a little bit harder in a multifamily environment. So, but one thing to look at, I think, would be specialty lids, so you can still capture some of that material.
Thank you.
But the contamination fees will also help address that.
Yeah, but
In theory.
Yes, I was gonna say we don't wanna pay those, so, because eventually that gets passed on to the resident, whether they like it or not, and so we shouldn't punish them for people coming onto our property and dumping, so.
Yep.
I saw them do it this weekend, so, thank you.
No, appreciate it.
All right, anything else?
I just wanted to, in closing, thanks Curtis for coming up and giving this presentation. There's two things that we're really trying to do as staff, and it's one, to encourage recycling. I think folks are always interested in the how and the why and what's really going on. A number of our customer service staff did do the tour, and they can help to explain. Here's really what it looks like. We went to the MRF, we saw it ourselves. So I think that's been cool, and we're just continuing to provide options. So going back to the contamination charges, we have a high number of monthly contamination charges and trash overages. So if you're hearing from constituents, please remind them of these things. WM, say it myself, provides a great deal of information that we include in the Evans Express each month, that we try to continue to promote, educate. Feel free to please continue to encourage folks to look at that. There is an opportunity to potentially save money by making sure that all of your trash fits in your trash bin, that the lid closes, so that you don't have overage charges, and then following the guidelines for recycling can also reduce those contamination charges. So those are fees. As WM passes through to us, we get a report, as Curtis mentioned, with links to the pictures and that sort of thing. We pass those directly on to the residents. It's a direct service to provide that service to them. So we hear a number of times from folks who didn't realize, saw these extra charges. Sam's in the audience nodding too. Trying to educate folks about how they can avoid those additional fees is to follow the rules here. And if you're always finding that your trash you have overage charges, or you have too much trash in the second bin or the recycling bin, taking advantage of that bundle opportunity for trash and recycling here is a more cost-effective way than paying those overage charges.
So this doesn't have to deal with recycling, but what are those overage charges per incident?
I want to say around 375.
I'm gonna say high $3.
Just went up the past 2 months. They were 378, they just went up. And that's per bin, per incident. We have multiple homes that have multiple bins, multiple charges.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Sam and I were looking at a couple of residents just last week who have multiple trash cans that have overage charges every week.
Wow.
So, then you may have 4 overage charges. Oh, but you have 2 trash cans. You have 8 overage charges.
As well get that third trash can.
So it does add up pretty quickly the number of times. We did a big education campaign. WM was really gracious in providing the materials for us to give a few months notice. Folks were given a courtesy notice before they were charged. And to your point, we were hopeful that would help change behavior to comply with some of the rules. And we're not seeing a high success rate of those fees changing behavior here in Evans. So we're hoping additional campaign of education and pushing these materials will help. And I think we'll try to put some things on our website if you're willing, Curtis. We'd like to be able to use some of this presentation and this video and some of these other materials that we'll push.
That'd be great if we can. Yep. Awesome.
You also mentioned that there's going to be grants for certain things. If you can also relay what that looks like for us if you have a moment.
Yeah, so the primary program is Front Range Waste Diversion Grant. WM actually received one to expand our compost operations at a landfill in Denver. I working with the EPA. There's EPA grants as well. So, for example, I've worked with the city of Laramie. They want Laramie, Wyoming. They're trying to roll out multifamily recycling that you asked about, and so they are receiving an EPA grant to buy the containers for multifamily. So there's a lot of grant money out there available, and so can certainly pass that along to your staff when those opportunities become available.
Well, great. Thank you so much for coming. Really appreciate your time and a great presentation on that. So, thank you. All right, next on our agenda, we have community cleanup recap and discussion. Turn that over to staff.
Yes, Mayor and Council. This next business item This next business item is something I've asked Peter and Curtis to work on, really to recap what our annual cleanup event looks like. So in 2023, my first year here, as you know, in the spring we had 2 separate weekends, and in the fall we had 2 separate weekends. And with that convenience comes a lot of cost to the city. So Curtis will jump into those numbers here in just a minute. Going into 2024, what we did is we backed that back to 1 weekend in the spring, 1 weekend in the fall, to get a better handle on those costs. So the point tonight is to show you guys what this cost is what the city is facing in cost, and the cleanup event, very good for community beautification, but it comes with a cost. And so if we're going to subsidize, if the city council is interested in subsidizing this, I want you to be aware of what is that true cost, so you're aware of the impact of that subsidy on the refuse funds. So with that, I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to Curtis and Peter.
Good evening, council members. For the record, Peter Wysocki, Assistant City Manager. Well, that pretty much covers our presentation, so we're done. Okay. So, yes, we will cover just a recap of last year's events. Just kind of refresh your course on who qualifies for this program. We'll dive into costs and revenues associated with that. That's something that Curtis has worked on pretty extensively to illustrate to the city council what the program truly costs the city. And then we'll discuss some options for you to consider. Of course, today is just a work session on the program overall. We're not seeking any decisions today, but certainly engaged dialogue and direction from council would be much appreciated. So as we move forward through the presentation, there's some items that council should consider about the program itself. And this was all presented in your packet. But essentially, this is a excellent program. I think we can all agree that this provides an opportunity for Evans residents to dispose of their junk, trash, that otherwise would be perhaps not removed from their properties, and certainly results in less work on our code enforcement, our neighborhood services staff, as, you know, in theory, right, the junk and trash that perhaps would otherwise be stored on the property is voluntarily being and proactively being removed by property owners and residents. So overall, I think this is we can agree that this is a good program. It just really depends how much it costs the city and whether or not we should adjust how the program operates and whether or not fees should be increased. And of course, if they are increased, you know, we don't want to have them increased to the point where they're too costly and it becomes a disincentive for residents to participate. So I'm new to Evans, so I experienced community cleanup for the first time this fall. And just as a new person to the community, I thought it was excellent. It was well operated by city staff, of course, by our partners in waste management and other recycling agencies. And just generally, the amount of residents that visited the event was very impressive. The day after, I talked to Cody actually, and like, okay, how much is this really costing us? You know, the vouchers are only $10, and we're breaking even. So I think this exercise really will shed some light on the true cost, itemized true cost of the program itself. Of course, initial vouchers are if the residents received city trash removal services through waste management, the vouchers are free. Of course, additional vouchers can be purchased for $10 each. If they're purchased at the gate or at the event, the amount of vouchers needed to be purchased depends on the amount of trash and debris is being delivered. So a small pickup truck could be just one $10 voucher. If there's a trailer or a bigger load, then the individual will need to buy two $10 vouchers. But we keep track of the amount of the usage is kept tracked by the number of vouchers that are being sold. That makes sense. So this is a total participation for 2024. We had almost 1,600 participants, total participants in the spring event, and a little bit over 1,800 in 2024, to a total of 3,389 vouchers that were either provided at no cost or sold at the event. So I think that's a pretty good number for the size of our community. Okay, so with that, I'll turn it over to Curtis. He'll go over the cost and expense analysis, and hopefully you'll find that very informational. We did attach the cost analysis to your council cover memo. Hopefully you're able to peruse that. There's a lot of detail there. This will just highlight some of the costs for 2024. So Curtis, all yours.
Thank you, Peter. So looking at this, I just wanted to start this out by showing that the waste management roll-off fees and the city fees for vouchers difference from 2019 to present. Looking from then, it's gone up over 50% for the waste management roll-off fees, and we have gone up 0% on our actual voucher fees. We've stayed at $10 the entire time. We did want to note that the 2023 began a new contract with WM, and that was the largest increase in the roll-off costs, and that's because we went out to bid, is what I was talking to Curtis about previously. So that's where we saw the biggest increase in the waste management roll-off fee. We've only seen roughly about a 10% increase overall since 2023 contract began. So this is the ledger for the revenue and expenses that we utilize for the spring cleanup and the fall cleanup events. The tires that are revenue that we receive is just pretty much handed off to the tire recycling. We charge the residents what we get charged in order to recycle those tires. For the vouchers, you can see that we have a good participation with the purchase vouchers because each voucher costs $10. So 533 people bought vouchers in 2024 spring cleanup and over 800 in the fall 2024 cleanup. And then based off of direction from the city manager, we started recycling the metal ourselves in fall of 2024 instead of contracting out or letting someone else come to the cleanup site to pick up the metal. We took all the responsibility and they got all the profit out of that. So we started recycling our own metal in the fall of 2024, at least taking it to the metal recyclers, and we had a revenue of $3,030.60. For the expenses, in the spring of 2024, a lot of the expenses was for postage. We tried to send out postcards to residents so that it was less easy to copy the postcards or the mail-ins that go in our water bill. However, during that time frame, we did have a few hundred of the postcards come back as undeliverable, and we did hear from the residents that they did not receive them at the time. The largest portion of the fees does go through waste management. As you saw, it was over $400 per roll-off. It was $421.60 per roll-off, and we had a lot of roll-offs. And any weight over 5 tons does have an overage fee on there as well. So everything costs money, and it does keep going up for that. The tires, again, it was expensed out because we just had revenue on there. And then personnel costs, we do have to man it for both days, both weekends for both days, and we did have an increase in personnel in the fall of 2024 because it was a 2-day event, and we learned from the spring that it was going to get extremely busy during that weekend, so we wanted to have additional staff on hand to make sure people aren't putting tires in the giant trash pile they're not supposed to, or putting TVs that they're not supposed to put in there as well. And then in spring of 2024, there was a large fund for $18,300 for mulch kind of catch up. For previous years, we didn't mulch a lot of the yard waste that was brought in there, tree branches, things along those lines. So we had to play catch up because it was taking up a large portion of the First Avenue lot. Going forward, we will be doing this after every cleanup event, depending on direction from City Council. And this last time it cost about $2,500 just for this one-time event, for a total of $140,000 or just over $140,000 And to note, we do charge approximately a 10% overage on the refuse services for fund management and administration. And after all that is taken out, we have approximately 20,000 left over to assist in the cleanup event. So if we compare what we are charging for the vouchers at $10 in comparison to the closest landfill, which is Waste Management Northwell Landfill in Alt, in 2024 they were charging $79 for a small truckload to bring the pretty much a similar size to what we are accepting at the cleanup events. And then for a larger truck size, it was $108 for them to bring it to Waste Management Alt. Increasing in 2025, they did increase their fees to $83 for a small truckload and $113 for a large truckload. Just as a close comparison, looking at the current Larimer County landfill, it was $30 for the same small truckload, and they increased it to $35 in 2025. And talking with Curtis before his presentation this afternoon, he was saying with their new landfill, we're not really sure what the prices are going to be, and that their landfill in Larimer County may close mid-year, and we could see an uptick in people going to the alt one instead. But it just does show that the $10 that we are charging is very beneficial to the residents, and we can see why we have mass participation in the cleanup events, because it is extremely less cost for them to go to our cleanup events than to go to a landfill.
Excuse me, Curtis?
Sure.
Does Larimer County accept trash from Wall County?
I've only been there when I was residing in Larimer County, and they didn't ask for ID. So I believe they want you to be a Larimer County resident, but I didn't see them ask for ID the few times I've been there. Yep. So turning our attention to what the total cost breakdown for 2024 based on participation, what we're expecting in 2025 for potential voucher fees. So I took the $140,540.26 and subtracted the approximate $20,000 that was left over in the refuse fund. That way we're not overcharging the residents, and that we're still utilizing the refuse fund for this. And the $3,389 or 3,389 vouchers that were received, it does come down to about $35 per voucher in 2024. For 2025, we did increase the overall cost expected for the cleanup events just based off of waste management increases, salary increases, and then any other miscellaneous items that we may need. And that does bring a total voucher cost, if we don't provide free vouchers, to $44.26.
So with that information, there's some discussion points and options that the council should consider. Obviously, we can continue with the program as is. Obviously, it's very well, very good participation. I believe it does result in overall community cleanup. The program runs well as is. However, as the numbers illustrate, it is something that the program does not pay for itself, essentially. It is not that we have to use fund balance or reserve funding, but simply it is a draw on the general fund through our budget process. So the program essentially does not recoup the costs to operate it. So options, of course, include increasing the fees, and there's a number of different ways that we can adjust the fees. We can continue with the free vouchers, but increase the additional vouchers or the cost of the additional vouchers. We can just charge for all vouchers. Obviously, then that could reduce the additional vouchers because the costs are recouped through the initial charge, what are now the free or no-cost vouchers. If we do look at increasing the fees, of course, the option is to increase them gradually, not just an entire amount, whether the first event or in 2025, but have an increase in the fees over, let's say, multiple events or over the next 3 to 4 or 5 years. I guess the bottom line is, we need to decide whether or not we want 100% cost recovery, or do we want to look at, a reduced percentage, right? Let's say 80 or 75% of cost recovery, recognizing that these events are essential, essentially, to meet council's goal of community beautification. And I think that's the ultimate goal of this, is not just to provide a means for residents to remove their trash, their junk, but also achieving the overall goal of community beautification. One thing that I think we notice as staff is that not all trash is the same. Obviously, there's residents that bring in their typical yard waste, their stuff that's just laying around the house. Of course, we have some used construction materials being delivered as well. Of course, they're bulky and they're heavy. Mattresses, just things of that nature that it's good that they're disposing of it. But also that also means that it's heavy, it's bulky, and then basically it means more roll-off dumpsters. So we're not suggesting that maybe we should change that, but I think we need to recognize that there is a cost associated with the bulk and the weight of the material that's being delivered. Of course, we can have only one event per year versus two. There's pluses and minuses with that, right? People kind of typically get excited about their spring cleaning, get rid of their yard waste, so on and so forth. Of course, after the summer and in the fall, we're kind of getting ready for the winter. So having two events is a good option. But it is costly to basically mobilize and schedule those events twice per year. So where do we go from here? I think I hope to have a robust discussion with City Council, just gauge your appetite for which direction we want to go. Of course, we would present some program alternatives to you at a future work session, and if we're looking at adjusting the fees, those would need to come back for formal action during a regular meeting. But with that, of course, we're open to comments, suggestions, recommendations from you, and then we'll take it back and work on updating the program. So with that, I think we'll turn it over to you all.
All right, great. Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Curtis, for the presentation. So my thoughts on this is it's definitely something we need to continue to go, and I think reducing it to one time a year is probably not beneficial. I know we've been doing 2 events every year, and it's always had a great turnout. I do agree that we'll have to increase some type of fees. We're not here to make a profit, but I definitely think we need to find a way to do a cost recovery. One thing I wanted to bring up, and this is maybe for us to consider, and we'll just maybe have to have some more conversations with the county on this, but Cody and I, about a month ago, had a conversation with Commissioner James, and one of the things we talked about was maybe including those that do not live in the city, but to use our programs, and they would help us offset the cost of this. We did say that our program was not sustainable even for the city itself, but they would be willing to provide us additional roll-offs and additional funding if we wanted to bring in, places like Highland Park and a couple other places that are not within the city limits to maybe offset our cost or help us recover our cost as well. So that's something that maybe we can consider as well as adding them, and plus with the county's assistance, we probably wind up breaking even with our cost recovery there. But definitely need to keep it at twice a year like we've been doing it now, and definitely have to do some fee increases to at least have a cost recovery and not be a deficit. That's a huge deficit every year, about $140,000 of general funds. So.
I have a question. Could we go back to the slide where it showed the negative 140,000? So our most expensive was, like you guys said, the waste management, and then it looks like the next one is personnel. That being said, yes, I do think we need to keep 2 a year, but we definitely need to cut the costs. And I am open for the limiting of the refuse, just because I know they can have some of this stuff picked up on their own. And I get that we're providing a service, but like mattresses, those I want to say are only $45 to have Waste Management
No,
come
it's
pick
not.
them up. Used to be.
Yeah,
I'm just saying.
They're $150 now.
Right,
Pop.
but you know what people do? Here's the thing. We have this program. Yes, it's helpful, but half the time, where do they dump it? At a commercial property, and we're stuck paying for it. And the residents get away with, or people get away with doing the wrong thing, and we're stuck paying for it. And then we have to pass that charge on to my people. That's just not fair. So we probably need to look at definitely increasing either voucher fees or, you know, like you guys said, even at the plants, they charge if there's extra. Something's got to be done because it's not fair to everybody else to have to pay for that. And they may have to look into calling Waste Management and having them pick up some of those items. But for me, and I'm not saying, you know, anyone's going to agree with me, just for me, like you said, the construction material, I have dealt with that. I have had people dump, the roofing tiles and that in my dumpsters, and the dumpsters get so heavy the trucks can't lift them. So I've had to deal with all this, and I understand 100%. But I mean, because you think, oh, they're just the, you know, the flat panels for the roofs and that, they're not going to take up much space. They weigh a lot. So that would be probably affecting some of your overage costs too. So that might be something we need to look at besides increasing the fees. And that's just my opinion. It's just thrown out there. I understand everybody may have different ideas.
A little over.
I'm sorry.
And a little over, what was it? Can you go back to the slide of how much it cost? Was it $44 and some odd cents?
$44.26.
So at $44.26, even if you went to that, that's still cheaper than driving down to Alt and taking your load there, including the gas and everything. That's still cheaper. Even if you say drove to Larimer County and they took it, that's still cheaper because of your time and the gas and, you know, and everything that you have to do to drive back and forth there. So even if that's still a great deal for residents, at least that's my opinion.
Tammy, can I just get some clarification, because I
Sure.
misunderstood your point? If we say, hey, you can't bring building materials and you can't bring mattresses, isn't that gonna make it more likely that people then improperly dump it?
They do it anyway.
Exactly.
They're gonna do it anyway. I can't tell you, especially they wait till the weekend when nobody's around, and you can drive through Crescent Cove and you could get 3 houses full of furniture from what they dump. And it doesn't, I know we have these twice a year, but it doesn't alleviate the cost to me and my
Right.
residents. It doesn't.
Right, but I'm just.
But I don't think it will increase the dumping at my property either.
Okay.
I'll be honest, yes.
So I think the program's really important. Beautification of the city is really important. I think just from a high level, it's essential that we do it twice a year, in my perspective. It gives residents, and I'm speaking personally, it gives me an opportunity to really invest several weeks ahead of time, collect heavy waste, purge it, and not go to Tammy's place and illegally dump. I have an opportunity to really make my home beautiful again. And we all store a lot of stuff that we promise we're gonna get rid of. This is a great opportunity for our residents to do it. Now, speaking on a cost perspective, even if we charged $45, that doesn't give me sticker shock. I'm looking at it through the lens of a consumer. I'm looking at it as my wife is yelling at me for holding onto the mattress and a piano and a bunch of other junk. I'm willing to spend $90 to get rid of it to just have a happy household. So $45, so that we can at least break even, is more than acceptable to my lens. Again, 2 events a year. We don't have to maybe do 2 days. Maybe 2 Saturdays a year is efficient, just to save in that labor cost. With the balance sheet of $64,000 going to waste management, I've always, as an Evans resident, thought, I'm forced to use WM, and that's my only option. So I always assumed that WM just was giving us a great deal and made it almost an extra bonus of having exclusivity to our waste service. And now, to find out that we're paying them $64,000 makes me wonder, what are they doing for us? Are they giving us discounts? Are they making this economically incentive, or are they making this a fair game to play? Or are we going to have to look at potentially dumping that contract and going with another Green Mountain contract, that more of a buy-in from the service provider? Cost sharing is pretty important. Are there other ways for us to get rid of the waste? There's green waste recycling in Greeley. Could we reach out to them and co-partner, just like Mayor Clark is talking about, having the county co-share this cost? Instead of sending it to the dump or mulching it, could we just send it to their facility and they're set up to do that commercial mulching? The only concern I have with sharing these costs with Weld County is this is an Evans event. How will we be able to police if the buy-in is equal, or the county is paying their fair share, or are we just going to increase more costs that we have to pass on and eat out of the general fund? In summary, I really think it's a great thing, and $45 a dump doesn't scare me. And I don't think it should be free, even though I would like it to be free. I take advantage of it twice a year, proudly. But running a deficit isn't how you run a successful organization. But we're also here to serve the people. So maybe we can come up with a balance of maybe you get one free, no construction materials, clear signage, simple training before it goes out, and then if you need that second dump, then it's $50. Something like that, kind of a give and take.
I think that's something that might be a good striking balance. Maybe one free, or, like you said, if you're gonna, no construction material, no this, but if you're gonna pay for it, then you're allowed certain items. So you wanna dump a mattress, okay, now you're gonna pay the $50. Or if you wanna dump some roof tiles, now you're paying the $50. But for basic, general, everyday debris, you get one free voucher. For anything above and beyond that general debris, then you pay.
Now, one thing we have to keep in mind is that we're asking the city staff to do this. So the simpler it is, the more efficient it will become. So keep it simple.
Right.
And if you bring a mattress and it's your first free dump, good for you. But if it takes more cubic yards than that, we want to really keep it really simple for our team, because then you bring the human element into it and it becomes subjective. And then Chris might get better treatment than I'll get, and that won't fly. So
I also agree with having the 2 events. I think that is important. I think with the fee change, I like the gradual component just because it has been free. I wouldn't want to shock our residents with having, this high cost. I think, as we move forward, maybe the free voucher and then gradually increase the additional and then kind of see what that looks like for the actual voucher as we move forward. I know that the 10% that we charge, that covers technically the admin cost and probably some other fees as well, because you said you had to subtract the $20,000 that is left over from that. So it looks like that covers that, and then it covers some more. Granted, the WM fee, that is high, but at least we're some money's going towards that. And then, that's all I have. But I would like to see the gradual component. I think it's important, and I do echo what was mentioned.
Who else?
So I think 2 times a year, it supports our citizens. But I do think the one free, and I think that we just need to bite the bullet on that second one. Do the, $45 or $50. Because again, you're still getting your one free.
I do think that this could be a successful transition if we do just a couple key things, and communication is important.
Extremely.
Because there's been several times that I brought my trailer in and it was a voucher. And then the second time was 2 vouchers. So I just took Chris's voucher. I think that if we can set that baseline ahead of time so that there's clear expectations. So I know as a resident, when I'm showing up, they're going to be looking for construction material and they'll reject the entire load as contamination. And they're going to charge me because I've seen a picture, because clearly doing math must be hard. So having a picture of a trailer that says, bring a voucher and $50, and we will take this load. As long as it's clear and concise, I think we can make this a streamlined, efficient procedure. And I'm really impressed with how it's ran currently. In and out in 8 minutes, super friendly staff, clear expectations of performance. I love the event. But yeah, if we change these, we need to at least let them know before they get to the gate so there's not that confrontation.
Councilmember Fair?
Yeah, I actually have quite a few questions. So as I'm understanding it, we had about $20,000 from the refuse fund annually that supports this event.
Right.
But that's not, is that what we're budgeting for it annually? Because in the report it says in 2023 we had $100,000 budgeted for the cleanup event. Was that from the refuse fund?
I believe it's from the general.
That's from the general fund.
Sorry, I didn't hear the whole question.
So we have 20,000 for the refuse fund, for the 100,000 budgeted from the general fund, correct?
No, we had budgeted that amount from the refuse fund. The problem is there's also overhead and admin costs to not manage the fund. And when we have overages of the event that are above what we expected to budget, the refuse fund does not have available fund balance above our required minimum 3-month reserves. So anything else that the refuse fund incurs during that year, the general fund has been paying them.
Okay, so one of the big factors that changed in the last year was a substantial decrease in funding from the refuse fund for the event. Then, yeah, so that's a big factor there. Plus costs, yeah, in 2023, bins went up from almost $300 to almost $400 per bin. So there's all that. I know that this started out as a city beautification type event, and I think that having operated it so cheap for so long, it has actually been counterproductive on that front. Like I have a box spring I need to get rid of now. If I can get rid of it for free or $10 in May, it might just sit on the side of my house for the next 3 months. As where if this was a little more competitive with the actual market, yeah.
Don't bring it to Crescent Cove.
Just take it to Crescent Cove.
However, hiking rates that much in 1 year, I know our customer service got a lot of verbal abuse when we went from $5 a voucher to $10 a voucher. That was a substantial increase at the time. I think 20 is totally reasonable. I think that, we're starting going back years ago. People were getting 4 free vouchers a year, and then they were only $5 unlimited vouchers after that. So we have made a lot of progress, and it still has a long ways to go. But that is kind of how I see it. If this does remain way too cheap, it's actually not a city beautification event. It actually is encouraging people to hang on to things they otherwise might have got rid of, is how I see that. What else have we got there? That's all I can think of for the moment. I know I got some more questions.
Anyone else?
I guess one.
Okay. Yeah.
Why are we mulching brush at our events? Because I don't think we have any use for the product, do we? I think of this last year, we had like a free mulch giveaway to anyone, not even Evans residents, trying to get rid of it. It's not a useful product for the city. And I ask this because Greeley does have the organics recycling facility, and they do mulch that, compost it, and that I don't remember who the vendor is that runs that for them, but they have a use for that end product. So that just might be one more thing. I don't know if you have anything.
Or cost effective.
So that could be something we limit to, building supplies and the mulching.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned during our strategic retreat an interest in an IGA type situation. Weld County's showing some interest in participating in this event, which is awesome. Greeley, I know, has shown interest over the years. They started the organics recycling facility. Weld County has household hazardous waste, but as it is currently, we got to go to multiple different things to take care of this all the time. So that could be a potential future event. That's not what we're discussing here today. We need to have a solution for this spring. And I do agree, twice a year. So we've been going down to 1 day per, or 1 weekend per event. I think that's a good move and was needed for sure. I'm also curious if we do have any comparison costs of what it, I know just like a few years ago, I had some friends that called Waste Management to pick up a couch, and it was $35 for any large bulk item pickup. And it sounds like that has also exponentially.
I got rid of a queen size mattress a year and a half ago, and it was $126.
Yeah, and that was at
Waste Management. Come pick it up at my house.
Come pick it up.
Yeah.
But if it's salvageable, I don't know if you know this, the ARC will come pick it up.
Right.
And so will, is it Habitat for Humanity?
Habitat won't pick up mattresses.
Not Habitat.
No, the research,
not
not
mattresses,
mattresses, but like couches, tables. I've given away quite a bit this last year. Didn't have to pay a dime. I gave away a bed frame, dressers, tables I wasn't using, and they came and picked them up. I just had to get them either to the front porch or the front yard. So people it's kind of like feeding into the recycling thing. There are sometimes other options besides just throw it away. Mattresses, definitely not. But maybe if we get a little more out about, hey, look at donating, or does it belong in the trash, but yes, I just want to throw that out there. There are options for some of these things.
Yeah, I think given all these substantial increases in costs of just trash in general, I think the free vouchers probably need to go away. And I mean, we're spending $4,000, it looks like, just on postcards and mailing before the event even begins. I mean, that immediately could be put right back into this event. When we added tires, that was intended to be that tires would pay their way. Someone drops off a tire, that's not additional cost. But as it's been run now, I don't really ever use the cleanup events. Things start growing in March. I'm trimming my trees and all that stuff. I've already taken care of all that, taken it to the organics facility before this event even occurs. Same thing in the fall. A lot of times we have it before leaves even fall, and then people still have 20 bags of leaves after the event is over, don't know what to do with. It's either hang on to them till spring or pay to get rid of them otherwise. So I think that we spend a lot of money mailing out vouchers. It's a very imperfect system, as you're saying. We tried to send out postcards and had, did you say, 150 customers or
A
so?
few hundred come back that were undeliverable, and then people calling the customer service unit.
Right. And even beyond that, we have a lot of people who rent in Evans. So if we're mailing out a voucher, and especially as these vouchers are worth more and more money, a lot of times that goes to the landlord. It sounds like, and the tenants aren't even getting it. So they might be paying for the cleanup event in their utility bill. One might be going, it doesn't come to them, they still have to go to the event and pay. So I think just like a user fee event is really, I think, seems like the most logical route for us to go twice a year. But yeah, jumping straight to $45 per voucher would be very, very hard, I think, for us to.
See, and I think the opposite for you in that, because I think that the first voucher should be free to start with. And if you have more than that, then you pay $50 or $45.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because if you have your neighbors who are in their 70s and they have their little truck and they go over there just for cleanup, we shouldn't be charging them. But when Jeff Crabtree shows up with a dumpster trailer,
Right.
I should be paying for that. I think that we can also treat this now like currency and have your name and address stamped on it. Because there's a lot of neighbors that are friends that are like, hey, I'm not using my voucher, do you need it? And I could easily scoop up 4 or 5 vouchers, which then becomes counterintuitive to the project.
I think that'd be expensive.
I don't think that, I think that would be challenging for staff at to try and manage that, especially people coming multiple times a day. You know, and people have to switch out. Some people have to take lunch or something like that.
I'm saying as simple as show an ID. Does your address on your ID match the voucher?
And your name.
And your
So
name,
Each voucher would have to be.
just
with
like
that
the
specific
utility bill.
address.
And as it's being dropped into their utility bill, that utility bill's being sent out, they pull their voucher out. The same way that the postman got that to their door, that same printout could have that same name and address. As long as that matches the ID, then it's a free dump. Oh, it doesn't match, that'll be $50.
Right. But I think free, like, you know, the term free, this is still being subsidized.
It is.
Yeah, so it's really not free. Your neighbors are paying for your free load, to the tune of $44 per dump.
And I like that because I would rather have my neighbors take their trash instead of leave it in their yard or clean up their dead tree that they should have cut down. And if the barrier to entry is low, but then we just are trying to weed out abusive dumps and then also at least make it somewhat pay for itself. So through my lens, I think that every resident should have one free voucher within reason, and anything beyond that, that same resident needs to pay their way.
I agree.
Yep.
So we're not here to solve it all today, but just to kind of give direction to staff. So what I'm hearing is still 2 times a year. Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
You don't have to go, just say, hey.
Well, I tackled that postcard thing, the first thing, as a unnecessary expense. Between a piece of paper like this for a voucher and, say, poster board, there's a lot of different varieties of thickness and colors that can be easily printed up and put in with the water bill. And postcards possibly lends itself to pilfering, I guess, a little bit. But I guess we don't send them to apartment buildings, so.
Nope,
So
because we pay for our own trash.
I do think that this is kind of an established practice to get people to do cleanup. And I don't think we need a 2-day per event, but we probably need to keep it at 2 days or 2 times a year to get participation and get some of it. And I know from some of the people staff that I've talked to, it seems like there seems to be some people that have been abusing it and bringing in things from outside, but they have friends in Evans that they can use to dispose of lots of trash that comes from other communities. So hopefully I think we're getting a handle on that, hopefully. And I'd like to see that the additional voucher definitely needs to be raised up. And I to keep it simple, probably $50, as Jeff suggested.
So let me just recap what I've been hearing from everybody. So everybody likes the 2 times a year, 1 free voucher, and then each additional voucher is $50 afterwards.
I would like it gradual. I think if we were to say fall and say, hey, this is this time, and then communicate like fall, this is increasing. So it gives a chance, but that's just my opinion.
Well, like in the increase, would we do one in the spring too?
But gradually, like not go straight
So
to 50.
so give me your
So, like,
example.
let's say like
$30 and then $50 in the fall.
right,
Okay.
right.
I definitely, I hear what you're saying, Jeff. I definitely cannot support personally the free initial voucher, because I think if I'm understanding this correctly, what we're saying is in 2025, we're now going to be, this is a new cost to the general fund. We've never had to the general fund before, except accidentally last year. Other than that, previously the refuse fund paid for this, but now we're going to be dedicating $120,000 or more every year from the general fund. And we're talking well over $1 million in the next 10 years that we're going to be subsidizing the cleanup event from the general fund, which is already very stretched. And, that's $1 million we're not going to spend on roads. We're going to start spending that on the cleanup event instead, because the refuse fund is not going to support this. So that is the reality of what we're saying here with suing.
So what are you saying, $50 across the board? No free vouchers?
Yeah, I don't think it needs to probably go to 50. I think we'd probably need to see a little bit more math. What would a $35 voucher just for everyone? And maybe we have like a lower subsidy, but right now, what I'm seeing is $120,000 from the general fund going to this, in addition to what we're already paying from the refuse fund and additional fees.
So I'm just going by what the majority, so what are you at? 'Cause we only
I'm
have a
at,
few minutes.
free voucher 2 days, or two times, and $50 extras.
Jeff, Councilmember Crabtree?
I'd like to see additional math.
Yeah.
Because the barrier to entry for $30 or $35 for everyone is okay. But also, I would prefer to see twice a year, one free dump for a small truck, $45, $50 additional vouchers.
Councilmember Johnson?
Also two events, twice a year, and then, one free voucher, the additional increase, but gradually.
Councilmember Neal?
I'd like to see still see 2 events in one day. That should cut, some of the staff costs.
Okay.
May not cut the amount of, roll-offs, but we'll see.
We'll see.
Next year.
Okay. So if one free voucher and
Yeah,
50
one free
or no
voucher.
free voucher?
I would say to keep it simple, straight $50.
Okay.
I'm for the everything, but I would like to see more numbers and maybe next year look at no free vouchers. So we keep it this year, but have the extras 50, and then let's see how that goes, and then next year possibly changing it. But also for me, I don't think we should take construction materials of any kind, and I think the mulching where you mentioned, we should just send them that way.
So let's do this. Still keep it twice a year. Look at one day, one weekend on each event. Let's look at the cost for one free voucher and each additional at 50. And then let's take a look on what Councilmember Fair said. No free voucher. We'll do 35, whatever, what those cost comparisons are for that as well. And how that would look.
So as clarification, is that one Saturday in spring, one Saturday in fall, or is that one weekend in spring, one weekend?
No,
in?
one Saturday in the spring, one Saturday in the fall.
Okay.
Yep. And then.
No
yeah.
construction materials.
And can we
Construction.
ask
No
really quick,
construction.
because if that's the case, what day do people tend to go more often? Is it a Saturday or a Sunday?
Packed, yeah.
Saturdays?
Saturday.
Sundays.
Based on the weekend, it's really weather dependent. In the spring, we have some winters come. So last spring, we had a slower Saturday because of the snow, but then it was extremely busy on Sunday.
Real quick, Councilman, we only have a couple minutes.
Well, I can tell you that, the last time I roofed with 3-tab shingles, I was able to feed all those shingles into, my trash can, and some of my neighbors have agreed, even though after they put their trash in there, and still keep the weight under 250 pounds for them
It's
to
pretty big.
to
It's
dump it,
impressive.
without having to try to rent a roll-off dumpster and have it sit there for 2 weeks and pay the extra.
No, they probably ran the extra stuff to my property.
Yeah.
All right, so